Hi, my name's Jo Hadley, and this is my podcast, Being a Human Lighthouse. I find it mind blowing. It's been 4 weeks since I did my last audio podcast. It was never my intention to have 4 weeks off or have any time off. It just seemed to have happened. And I'm curious whether it's connected to, which I'm sure it is, to all this increased energy that's coming into the world and the increased consciousness that a lot of the speakers, whether they're scientists or mystics or energy workers, that I listen to on various podcasts. It's fascinating how so many people from so many walks of life, and I love it when people with like medical degrees or quantum physicists end up coming to the same conclusion as someone who's come from more of a Buddhist or a mysticism background, that we're all connected. We all just have energies or traumas or patterns that block this inner essence that we all have, our soul, and we're all connected. We're all versions of this one energy, the paradox of life. So, curiously, with all these speakers talking about all this extra energy that will be coming into the earth atmosphere and planet and consciousness from December the 4th, I have to say that marks very much the time when everything seemed to really intensify. All my old patterns, it was like I was going into the deep, dark basement of not only my life, but going back into ancestral traumas and patterns, collective traumas and patterns, looking at my own. And interesting, all this turmoil, it just brought up so much turmoil within. And I'm very well aware with the somatic counseling and all the works I've read and listened to over the years that all this turmoil and stuff was coming into my awareness to be seen and witnessed. So I knew that I was healing and transforming. But boy, it was intense and continues. I've just had some time off from work, so I've had more time just to sit, reflect, allow, and just start to wonder what this past month has been and what it's released and how far I've changed or how much I've changed in the past 4 weeks. The more I look in the rear vision mirror and look back at who I was even before COVID, I see that COVID, 2019, even before COVID, I knew my life was shifting and changing and going in a certain direction. But COVID definitely changed it because we were all forced to stay inside. And so that allowed me a lot of time to be introduced to new podcasts. There were so many online free summits to listen to, and I listened to many in various fields, whether it was music, whether it was sound, whether it was trauma, whether it was collective trauma, whether it was energy, whether it was just nutrition. I listened to so many different fields. And when I started to listen to scientific evidence, what was being said by many speakers, it allowed me to integrate things, not just within the sphere that I'd been trained in, but it opened up a bigger picture. And I realized I couldn't go back. So I did leave traditional physiotherapy in July 2024. But even, well, ever since I started learning a holistic technique, which was fascia manipulation, which introduced the entire body and linking people's medical history, their injuries, their current, any sort of changes in their organ or illnesses, how the lines through the body, through the fascia, via the meridian lines, moved energy, released not only physical pains and improved physical movement, but People often reported a lightness, a sensation of freeing, some sort of almost emotional breakthroughs at times. And that has been what has spurred me on for my training and learning of counseling and compassion inquiry, and just reading many, many books upon healing trauma and how it manifests in the body and the physical plane, the somatic therapies. Over my break, I've read the latest book from a collaboration between Thomas Hubel and Richard Swartz. Richard Swartz, who is known for his internal family systems, which is a form of trauma sort of release and integration pattern. Similar but different to the compassion inquiry that I learned, and it's from Dr. Gabor Mate. And of course, Thomas Hubel is a collective trauma and ancestral trauma expert. So quite ironic that their book came out just when I knew that I was working on my own, not only individual patterns, but ancestral and collective as well. If I look back, I think before 2020, I probably would never have even considered ancestral trauma or patterns or even the collective. I would have just focused solely on the individual and my own particular issues. So I can see how far I've come there. Everything's a journey. And I often liken life to my former life as a marathon runner, that you've got to know where you're running to. You've got to know where you're headed to. But if you think about the destination and the end, too often it does your head in and causes a lot of problems, especially mentally and emotionally. And I guess ultimately physically, because sometimes you get to past that 30-kilometer mark and your mind starts to play games with you, and then the emotions, and then the physical starts to, all the old injuries and niggles start to come out, and it becomes physically very challenging at times. So I used to tell people, know where you're going, just focus on the step that you're in, the moment you're in. It's nice to sometimes look back when you're going past the markers, like 10Ks or 15Ks, 20Ks, looking back going, wow, I've come a long way. Have a little peek to where you still got to go, but don't focus on it too much, because if you focus on how far and how much is left, it just seems overwhelming and daunting. And to me, that's a bit like journey through life, our own processes of healing. And healing's a process. It's like the never-ending marathon. Keep looking to where you're going, but don't focus on how far you've got to go, because it really will do your head in and make you feel like you've failed. And it's always good to have a quick look back to see just how far you've come. So I guess in this past month, not only have I been dealing and feeling with all these intense sensations that are coming up, these patterns that I recognize. And I know that I've come a long way, because in the past, I would have dealt with them a bit differently. Now, when things come up, even though they were intense, I knew it's not the circumstance that was happening in my life, even though it was real, it was happening. I kept going, oh my goodness, this is just the outer circumstance of a very old pattern. And I had to go back in and deal with that initial pattern that often started in my childhood. And some of them I could actually, not only when I dealt with my own childhood parts of the pattern, would actually find how it linked in with my ancestors. I was quite lucky in a way that my mother often told me a lot about not only her side of the family, but my father's. I didn't meet a lot of these people because there seemed to be a bit of a tradition of having children late in life. And also, when I was growing up, the first 11 years we lived in a small city in Australia, thousands upon thousands of kilometres away from the relatives and family of my father and my mother. And my mother's being twice as far away as my father's were. So I didn't get to interact with grandparents and aunts, uncles, or the family too much in person, but my mother did tell me stories. And I had an interesting reaction in about 2023 when I visited Salt Lake City. Of course, what do you do in Salt Lake City? You go to the world's biggest genealogical library. And I did. There was a lady there who was very helpful. She was helping me look at my ancestors. And I've never really been that interested in doing family trees, but I thought let's have a little peek, see what they've got on file. And it's curious that with my mother's parents, I knew maiden names, I knew all their names, I knew where they came from. I couldn't find them. They didn't seem to be listed. It was like didn't exist, which I found really curious. I did know that my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, had previously been difficult to trace because myself and my cousins had gone and worked in the UK, and we had ancestral visas that we could go for 4 years. And of course, the first cousin that went did all the hard work and found it very tricky to find evidence of our maternal grandfather. But I found so much on my father's side of the family. That's interesting. We never had a lot to do with my father's side of the family when I was growing up. Even my father didn't have a lot to do with his own family. There was a lot of darkness and trauma on that side. And I found it quite curious that just seeing the names of my father's grandparents or parents triggered something in me that I just went, oh no, don't want to go there. And I just basically shut it all down and just took off really quickly, which is a sure sign that something had been triggered in me. I just went, nope, don't want to deal with my father's side of the family. Ugh, I feel sick just thinking about them. That today is definitely a big cue and a clue to that there's something that I needed to go into deeper. Even as only as recent as 2023, I didn't think it was that important because I hadn't had them in my life, so I didn't think they were going to influence me that much. But curiously, especially the past month, I've been really just sitting with the energy of my ancestors, and especially on my father's side, the side that I didn't want to look at, the side that made me just rush out of that genealogical library. I realize that there's a lot of shame, and a lot of anger, a lot of sadness in that side of the family. So I've been sitting and feeling and allowing it just to come up and be witnessed. Because that is how we move things out. Don't want it to be overwhelming, and sometimes it felt completely overwhelming. Even for me, who has an understanding, it's been a bit tricky. And the universe has a wonderful way of sending us challenges that really do push our triggers. And I've had probably my biggest trigger, something that really, really triggers me, happen as well during this 4 months. 4 months. I wish it was 4 months, it's 4 weeks. So I had this massive other trigger happen. It's like the biggest fear of my life, and then something out of circumstance triggered that. Even though it didn't happen, it was all theoretical. It still triggered this what if, what if, what if in me, and my body reacted as if it actually was happening. And again, I had to sit with it and face that and look at that and examine it. Then that was really intense. And as I say, sometimes we can do a lot on our own. But with that particular one, I was just so grateful to be a part of a wonderful online group. And my friends in this group, I just allowed all this negativity and sadness and emotion that to come up and be seen. And they really allowed me to just heal in this group. And it was really very therapeutic. And I was extremely grateful. It allowed me to address what I needed to address in the particular situation to the best of my ability, but also to allow just those deep fears that come up. And the fears, they play tricks on our mind, and our mind, this stuff isn't true. It's just like a what if. It's like we have to deal with things in the moment. And this was oh, if this, if that, if that, if this, someone said this could happen. So I was terrified it might possibly happen. So that's true. The situation could possibly have happened, and I've done the best that I can to be ready and able to address it if it does, but also not to have it playing out in my mind, because the mind and the body can't tell the difference between real and imagined. And I was going over and over and over in my head in this imaginary scenario, the imaginary worst case scenario, and my body was responding with such inner terror and constriction. But I was extremely grateful that I think it wasn't just one person that helped me, it was a small group. And I think just the power of the group helped exponentially, because that was my biggest, definitely my biggest fear and biggest issue and biggest pattern. So I spent a lot of days just sitting, meditating, walking, doing breath work, and allowing all the stuff, what I think is from my basement, and probably from my ancestors' basement, to come up. And listening to loads of podcasts. Because also during this time, I made a decision, or came to the realization, is probably more accurate, that I'd been very interested in releasing and helping people release the traumas and the energies and the patterns held in their body. I did that with hands-on work, and I love that. Never thought I'd want to give that up. But again, around July 2024, when I walked away from physiotherapy, my hands forced me to stop. But I also lost this love of performing the technique and in performing this work, because that had kept me going for the last 10 years, just developing this skill, learning how to integrate and help and assist people with the hands-on work. And then just suddenly, boom, gone. The interest of pursuing that further just disappeared. I did have this hand issue because every time I thought about going back to it, even though it was half-hearted, it was like my hands were saying, no, we're not going to let you, because that path is no longer your path. Which, when you've got a skill, it's hard to let go. Working in the health field, it's always been my go-to. It's how I made my money. It's how I earned my living for most of my working life. And to suddenly just have that hands-on avenue just stop. Well, one, it was interesting just how much I just easily walked away from the technique and method of working that I loved, but how my hands didn't let me go back just because that was an easy, safe path. A lot of people who hear about the skills that I have, especially how I've learnt the compassion inquiry and counselling, always tell me what an awesome skill that is to have with hands-on work, and what a great business that would be. Yet, I don't use it at all, and it feels to me like that door just got closed. I always had this vision of creating a collective consciousness, energy center that just helped people access their own inner wisdom easier via a multitude of different techniques, because there's never one way for all of us or any of us. Each of us can get enlightenment or can release a pattern through different techniques or symbols or different people. I started running, which to me was a spiritual sort of a spiritual process. After reading the book Born to Run, it was recommended twice in the 1 week to me. I was treating marathon runners at the time, thought they were crazy. Read the book just so I could understand my marathon runners and found that my legs just wanted to start running. I always say I didn't choose to run, something chose it for me. And also, the book Born to Run had a very spiritual component to it. A lot of the people doing the barefoot running and running, trail running, quite spiritual. So for me, it became a meditation as well as a way to keep fit. It was a way for me to balance the spiritual and the achieving mental side. And I was well aware of the pull of both. It's very easy to fall into the trap of just pushing yourself and measuring yourself against others and pushing and trying to beat others. I could tell and notice that temptation within me. But instead, I focused more on just improving myself and allowing myself just to do what my body wanted to do. I had some mild competitive moments, but they just helped push me to improve myself to be the best runner I could be at the time. And that's what competition should be, what sport should be, about us having other people who we can emulate or trying to become just like them or as good as them. And all I could be was the best runner I could be, because we all run at a certain pace. We can't force ourselves to be faster than what we are. I always tried to listen to my body, to call myself crazy sensible. So this past 4 weeks has been super intense. I've reintroduced 2-minute cold showers, been doing my Wim Hof breathing, as well as other breath work. Lots of meditating, lots of tuning into the sensations in my body and tuning in to my higher self. Because the epiphany that I had was all the things that I'd been learning, which I just assumed was to become like a one-on-one counselor. I realized in this last month, with everything coming up, that that isn't really my goal. I thought it was. And because I thought it was, I'd been pursuing it and pushing it quite hard. And then when you start to hear all the closed doors I've had, I realize, you know what? I suspect this isn't my path. And because I couldn't think of how I could get to my ultimate goal of starting this consciousness collective, I thought it had to be through this as a starting point. But the universe has kindly closed all those doors, and I realized that maybe all these skills are really great to have. I've got a variety of skills, and I'm curious about how I'm going to put them all together and use them. So I'm going to eventually stop doing that. And I've just been sitting, meditating, and waiting for the inspiration to come. And over the past 4 weeks, I realized I still have these patterns that want to know, that they don't want to do the next step because they want to know what's coming. They want to know the next step. They want to make sure they're safe. And the lesson I'm being taught for the past 12 months at least is I've just got to let it unfold and trust the process. I do this at times, but I catch myself. There's still this little pattern in me that's very, very well developed. Started when I was very, very, very young, possibly even when I was born, that it just knows, and it sometimes can mimic my higher self. But I'm getting to notice it earlier and earlier because it always just wants to be safe. It wants to know what the next step is and likes to have it all worked out. So my goal for this year is just to go with the flow and see what unfolds. And the first thing I have to do is just accept where I am. It's not exactly where I want to be. I'm not particularly happy about where I am right now, but it's where I am. And I'm going to see what can unfold and what I can create from here. I've probably been doing a bit more work on connecting to my higher self. Like I said, the work of David Clements has really, really been a paradigm shift for me. And a lot of the people I've listened to is more about focusing on our inner essence, our true self. And as you do that, yes, the other stuff, the basement stuff does come up. But instead of chasing the basement stuff as I was before, I'm now letting it just come up spontaneously and trying to tune into my higher self and my soul much more consciously. So if you'd like to finish off this podcast with me with a short meditation, I just invite you to close your eyes if that feels okay. You can place your hand on your heart. Everything is optional. But if you have your hand on your heart, just focus on your breath and imagine it's going in and out through your heart center. Just breathing at your own pace, your own rhythm, often a little bit lower and slower is helpful. As you breathe in and out through the heart center, just notice the surface that you're sitting on. Feel your feet on the floor. Imagine that you've got roots growing from the soles of your feet that connect you to the center of the earth and are really grounding you into the physicality of the world. Your body is supported and grounded and held by the earth. Now I invite you just to imagine that you've got a cord coming out from the top of your head and plugging you into the center of the universe. So now you're connected to the stars and the universe above and to the earth below. And just imagine as you're breathing in and out through your heart center that you're just filling up with light and love, wisdom, and you're letting out everything that no longer serves you. And as you breathe in, just invite more of your higher self and your own inner wisdom or soul into your awareness. As you breathe in, feel yourself lightening, not only physically, but also within. It's like someone's turned the light on within all your cells, and they're now shining white light, light of your soul, your higher self. And as you breathe out, you're letting go of all the patterns, faulty beliefs, and toxins that you no longer want or need in your body. Just keep focusing on your breath, connecting with every breath in more and more to your higher self. And know that sometimes with the peace of the higher self, it sometimes allows all the basement muck to come up. If it does, just be curious, non-judgmental. Just notice. If anything's overwhelming, you just open your eyes and focus on your breath or your feet on the floor. Just tune into one of your five senses and reconnect yourself to the present moment. But if it's not overwhelming and something arises, just allow it. It's just coming up, passing out. And your awareness of it without judgment allows it to be seen and released. So you're indeed lighter. And your lens that you perceive the world is clearer. Nothing may come up during this session. It may come up a bit later. Same things apply. Just notice and be aware. And everything must stay peaceful. If anything's overwhelming, stop, open your eyes, tune into your five senses. Just re-ground yourself in the present moment. If you find things come up that are overwhelming, reach out to a therapist and have them assist you. Sometimes we need some assistance. Sometimes we can do this on our own. Because all we're doing is connecting to our higher self and our soul. Take 2 or 3 more breaths in and out through the heart center. Noticing how much you light up on the breath in and how much lighter you feel on the breath out. And after the third breath, you can gently open your eyes. And just tune in now that you've finished this little mini meditation. Do you feel lighter? Did anything arise? Just be curious and non-judgmental. If you feel lighter, you know you shifted something. We don't have to know the patterns that we shift or that leaves our energetic body. But just know if we feel lighter, we've shifted something. That means you're a little bit closer to living authentically from your higher self and soul. So until next time, take care. Bye.